Hello and welcome to the 15th episode of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
Today we're talking about physics, but before we begin...
Metaphysics.
No? Just
physics.
That's
the next chapter.
Just physics. Did you read the wrong chapter?
No, I read the right chapter. I'm just at the end of the chapter. I read it. Now I'm at the end of it, and there it is.
Yes. Before we begin, I do want to mention nobody has won the t-shirt giveaway, which is good because we still have not designed a t-shirt at all. We have not even started on that. But it still stands. The person who tweets us the most interesting or thought-provoking thing... decided by us, the judges will win a free Unlimited Opinions t-shirt.
And since no one is tweeting, it doesn't even have to be thought-provoking, because if you just say anything, you have won.
Yes, your odds are high of winning.
Yes, because relative to the other non-existent comments, one comment, no matter how stupid, banal, that's the right word?
That's a good word.
You will be a winner.
Yes.
Which seems appropriate for our
podcast. Yes. That seems exactly about right. All right, so starting with Augustine on time.
Wait, you didn't tell him the
Twitter, the Twitter handle, yes.
Twitter handle.
At capital U, lowercase LMTD, capital O opinions. It's Omted opinions.
All right, very good.
Yes. All right, so starting with Augustine on time. So he really believed there was a big controversy, really, in the church at this time between Catholics, really, whether or not, the world was infinite, and if so, what existed before the world existed? If God is infinite, what existed before creation? And to this...
Well, the Bible says he created the universe.
Yes, but if he is an infinite being, and there's a set point when the universe began, what happened before the universe?
Right.
Yes,
right.
So that's the big debate.
Yes.
And so Augustine says that before heaven and earth, there was just no such thing as time. So prior to creation, it's kind of useless to say, well, what happened before that? Because there was no before, there was no after in any sort of sense, because there was no time. And he also says that there's only single eternal present in God. So he kind of, again, takes this thing, this idea of God being kind of a timeless being, outside of time, kind of brings that back up again, and that God is only forever present. There is no before or after for God. He just is.
And I love this quote where he says, "What is time?" he asks. "If no one asks me, I know. If I wish to explain to an inquirer, I know not." And boy, that's the truth.
That's the truth with a lot of these things. It's kind of like things that we kind of know, I guess, or we have an understanding of, but it's so hard to put into words. Right. And that's what a lot of this chapter is really about. And then he also goes into that the only real time is the present. And this is kind of a very interesting kind of thought process here, because how can the past exist and how can the future exist if we can't go there, right? Because it's always turning into the present, and the future's always ahead of us, the past is always behind. So does it really exist to us? Because however we perceive things is always the present, and that never changes.
Which reminds me of because he's talking about. The length of time is not really a length of time, but a length of memory, and then time in the future is just anticipation of what's going to happen. And I think I've told you about when I was about your age, and I was an odd duck. I get bored in class, and I would page ahead in my notebook.
Yes,
I don't know,
heard the story
30 pages,
times, yes.
30 pages ahead, and I'd write a note to future Mark, and I'd sign it past Mark, but really I was writing it to present Mark in the future.
Yes.
Because once I read it, I was present Mark.
Yes.
And but of course I'd write it and then I'd forget about it.
Yes.
And then like a month or two later, I'd get to that point in the notebook where I'm taking notes, and I'd see a message from past Mark.
I was actually kind of thinking about that exact thing, because I'm actually filling up my Spanish notebook for this year, and I never finish notebooks in any of my classes. And I was thinking about that, and I should have written a note to myself.
That's right. See, you never listened to me.
I don't.
You make fun of me. And, that's so stupid. You're such a dork. But if you would have written a note to yourself at the beginning of this year, just something stupid like, or like say, I had a good day because of X just happened to me. It's kind of like a diary, I guess. But then when you I hope you have a good time at the next weekend. Just wishing yourself well, and then you get that, and it's just, or you just like say something stupid or funny, and then you forget about it, and then it's like, I am kind of funny. So I mean, I give that advice to everybody who's taking notes.
Yes, and so then Augustine also says that the only thing that can really be called the present is an indivisible atom of time. So kind of in the same way that we view matter, and that there are indivisible parts of it. He kind of views time in the same way, in that we can only really ever be in the present for a point, because time is, constantly moving. We are constantly moving through time, and we cannot ever call a period of time the present. There is only now, and that is the present and nothing else.
This reminds me, I can't remember the philosopher's name who made the argument that you couldn't traverse from there to here because
Zeno,
that's right. Thank you. I was trying to think of that earlier. That the distance is it can be divisible, and you can divide it in an infinity number of times, and so you can't really get from point A to point B, which is just nonsense. But that's what I was thinking of when I was reading this. It's very similar.
I think that exact argument is brought up in
right.
here. Is that like, well, can we really move through time at all? Because from now until tomorrow, there's an infinite amount of indivisible atoms of time. And it's like, well, if you can break it down so many times, you never really move anywhere.
Right.
And so Augustine kind of tries to solve these problems, and he says that time is only in our mind. It's not really a physical thing in any sort of sense. And he gives kind of three terms that kind of change, the definitions of time a little bit. He gives memory, which is the present of things past, because when we remember things, we remember them as if we are in the present. We do not remember them our memories are not, outside looking in. Our memories are us physically there.
This reminds me of X-Men, Days of Future Past.
I guess.
Isn't that the name of one of the movies?
Yes, that's one of the movies where they time travel and it gets confusing and ridiculous, yes.
It wasn't ridiculous.
Those X-Men movies are ridiculous.
The time travel ones are pretty cool. The Days of Future Past?
They get so absurd, though, because the X-Men movies are such a mixed bag, because some of them are really good, some of them are just awful.
I think all of them are both good and awful. But some are just more awful than good than the others.
That's actually pretty accurate.
But they all have really neat concepts beneath them in some ways than others. I was just thinking I want to rewatch the one where that they were young men coming up and
First Class. X-Men First Class. That's a great one.
Rewatch that one.
The original trilogy is decent, and then X-Men First Class is amazing.
I liked Wolverine. Isn't that where he's in Japan? And I liked the one where that Captain Picard was really old and going senile and doing weird
Logan,
things. Yeah, that was good.
Logan, yeah. That was like basically the last of the X-Men.
Yeah, and then he was like rescued that girl who had the things in her hands too. Yes. Yeah, she's fierce. Anyway,
back to Augustine. I don't know how we got to X-Men.
Days of Future Past.
Oh, that's right. And then he also gives, apart from memory, he gives sight kind of as a definition for the present, and that is the present of things present, and that when we're in the present, as we are now, we are experiencing things through our senses, like physically right now. There's no memory, there's no kind of looking forward. It just is through our senses. I jumbled that mess up.
It seems very Buddhist, be in the now.
I guess
focus on the present.
Yes. And then he also gives...
Don't worry about the future or concern yourself with the past. There's only now.
And then he also gives...
Wasn't that soothing?
That was something. You should do ASMR.
What?
You've never heard of ASMR?
No. What's ASMR? Is that an abbreviation for something?
It's an abbreviation for something. I don't know what it is, but it's this weird trend on the internet where people like... excuse me. People make like noises into the microphone. It's supposed to be soothing. Like sometimes they'll just like click like wooden sticks together, like really close to the mic. Or they're it's weird. ASMR.
Well, I used to have a cassette tape of thunderstorms.
Really?
Yeah, very soothing.
I remember always having a CD of whale songs that would always be put on as I took naps.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't just that. We had a CD. We had we had this. I think the storms too. But you want them like a distant storm, not like a bam. It was lightning and thunder. Oh God! But we did that because your older brother Sam was not very good about being quiet while your nap time, and we wanted you to have good naps.
Oh.
And so that was like a sound deadener.
I didn't know that.
So when he's squawking and demanding attention, it wouldn't wake you up, because I think sometimes he'd do it on purpose. Although he didn't want you to have any attention anyway, so it was kind of counterproductive, but he wasn't thinking all the way through when he was, 4 years old or whatever, 5.
So, anticipation, the last of Augustine's kind of shifts in time, is this, it's the present of things future. So because we kind of like imagine what's going to happen next, we kind of put ourselves in that moment in a sense, and that is anticipation, that is the future.
Yes, and as Tom Petty said, waiting is the hardest part.
Yes, okay.
I'm just gonna have stupid references throughout this podcast.
And then he also kind of, you're really hitting
I'm on fire
frequently, yeah. And then Augustine also says that because people tried to count the age of the world basically starting from creation, he kind of says, well, you can't do that because we don't really know exactly when creation is. The Bible says it began 6,000 years ago,
Right.
But we have to kind of count back from the present to determine the age of the world. We can't count back from a beginning or can't count forward from a beginning that we don't know.
Right. And as the great philosopher Stephen Miller said, time keeps on ticking into the future.
All right, Philoponus. So Philoponus was a big...
That's a song, by the way.
Yes, I know that's
okay.
a... Yes,
All right,
yes. I know who Stephen Miller is. And so Philoponus was this big critic of Aristotle, and so he kind of...
I have that on vinyl, by the way. Philoponus.
He tries to kind of take some of Aristotle's notions and tries to apply them, tries to counter them, I guess I should say.
Isn't it funny that we only know this because he had somebody that didn't like his philosophy that wrote against him,
Yes.
and then Philoponus is actually more prominent in this book than the guy that was criticizing.
Yes.
We only know it because the guy quoted him. Oh, yeah,
Yes. So we only know about the critic from the critic of the critic.
Ooh,
Yes.
that made my head spin.
Days of future past. And so...
It's not a time thing, but go ahead.
Okay. Okay. And so he kind
It reminds me of that Hobbit quote.
God.
The Hobbit quote where he's saying, I don't like half of you as much as the other half. How does that go?
I like less than... no, sorry. I know less than half of you half as well as I should like, and I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve.
I think that's good. That's a great
quote. It's a great quote.
Yes.
Anyway, Philoponus. So one of the first thing that he tries to counter about Aristotle is Aristotle's idea of the four elements, and he kind of added this fifth, ether. And Aristotle believed that they all had their specific motion. Like, for example, fire always travels up, stone or earth always travels down, and
Isn't
then
it
ether.
interesting that they're still talking about his kind of goofy theories this long after he's passed?
But in this chapter, we actually do get a bunch of people deciding that that's just kind of nonsense.
Making logical headway past it.
Yeah,
right.
So Philoponus finally says that just the complexity of planetary motion cannot be explained by this elementary tendency to travel in a circle, because that's what Aristotle believed. This ether controlled the planets, and it just tended to move in a circle. And he's like, well, everything's so complex. That's just absolutely ridiculous. And
well, he also had there were spiritual beings too.
Yes.
Right.
And that's still kind of a thing that's going on, because that's the roots of astrology and stuff.
Right.
So there's still some of that, especially in this chapter, but still kind of today a little bit. But
well, today's day and age.
There's a
lot of stupid people out there. I mean, nobody really believes in astrology except for weirdos and people who have mental illness.
We've just alienated all our astrologists.
Yes, there are no astrologists.
Yes.
I mean, I can't. There used to be a lady when I worked at a grocery store back in 1989 who would read her horoscope every day. Now, this is in a paper newspaper. I don't even know if they make those anymore, but she'd look, oh, it's my horoscope. Read me my horoscope, Mark. I read it to her, and she's like, that's so true.
Well, they're intentionally vague enough to apply to anybody. But anyway, he then kind of counters...
We should read our horoscopes and future podcasts.
I don't even know what sign I am or whatever. Isn't that...
I'm it's by the month of your day of your birth.
Oh, okay.
So I'm a Gemini, I think. I'm in June. You're in May.
I think I'm a Taurus.
Taurus?
Maybe.
Your mom would know.
Okay.
Women know those things.
Do they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because there's a different theory that you have a personality based upon your sign. Oh, you're a Gemini.
Yes.
You have these qualities. Isn't Taurus the bull?
Yeah.
Yeah. No. That's you.
I don't know. You really found that one funny. All right.
Well, you're full of bull. Aloni.
Yeah. So then, Philoponus kind of counters Aristotle's view that the world is infinite, because Aristotle kind of believed that we can't really, put a starting point on things. It has to be infinite. Excuse me. And Philoponus kind of argues with that, with Aristotle's own claims, because Aristotle at a different point says that. For something to travel it's impossible to travel through an infinite number of things. And so Philoponus kind of applies that to the age of the world, because for the world to get to the point where it's at now, it would have had to travel an infinite number of years if it was truly infinite, and we can't do that. We cannot add something onto infinity. Does that...
that's exactly what his philosophy
confused,
is. Yeah, but is that true?
I mean...
Even theoretically. So if it went infinitely in our past...
Yes.
Can't you add a day every day to the infinity from the past?
But I think it's more like it would have to go through infinity to get to where we are now, and that is physically impossible.
Why?
Well, because time is moving, and if time has to get through infinity before it gets to us, it's never going to get to us. Is that you're looking around the room like you're scared of something.
No, that's my brain working.
Oh.
I was trying to think of the answer to that is infinity. I just blew my mind, man.
So you're not going to counter anything about that?
No.
After all that working in your mind?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
All I could think of was Neil from The Young Ones.
What's the reference there?
You don't know Neil, the hippie?
Oh, I know the Young Ones.
You're bringing me down, man.
Oh, I didn't know if there's a specific infinity reference, but no.
I could probably find one, but
Okay.
I can't think it off the top of my head.
Yes. And so then he...
wasn't there a time travel Neil episode?
I don't know. I haven't seen this.
There was a 2 Neil episode, I thought.
I've only seen the ones that are like available on YouTube. I've never seen the full show.
I need to see about buying it. There weren't that many episodes.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
Bizarre.
University Challenge was the best episode ever.
That's a great episode. For all of our listeners out there, you have to watch that
Get
one.
The Young Ones.
Yes.
Watch it, live it, love it.
Not for everybody, but...
It is for everyone.
Okay.
Everyone, yes. Even astrologist.
All right. The world would be united through
the Young
common
Ones.
appreciation of the Young Ones.
And they had Motorhead play during one of the episodes.
Yes.
Ace of Spades.
Yes. Anyway, Philoponus then had this idea of motion.
We're still talking about the Philoponus?
Yeah, we're still talking about Philoponus. There's only like 5 sections in this one. We got to spend a little time on each one. And so Philoponus had this idea of motion, and that there's kind of this problem that Aristotle tried to solve. If a person throws a stone up into the air, and stone's natural tendency is to go down, how does it go through the air? And Aristotle kind of said, well, the air is pushing it up after it leaves your hand. And Philoponus kind of said, well, that's stupid.
Right.
It's just that the motion is put into that stone through the thrower's hand through impetus.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a notion that was still upheld until, I believe, Galileo, right?
Yeah, Galileo and Newton, where a body in motion tends to stay in motion, and body at rest stays at rest.
And then he kind of applies that same idea of impetus to the heavenly bodies, because they're still like trying to figure out how the planets rotate, and they're so complex and perfect. And he says, well, they were put into motion by God. God put that motion into them, and that is why they are perfect and complex.
It's a good logical argument. Yeah.
Yes. Now, the natural philosophy in the 13th century, moving on from Philoponus.
Yes.
So there were kind of some conflicts within the Arabic philosophers trying to adapt, the ancient Greek ideas of physics and all of that. And Avicenna kind of believed here about motion, that motion was only due to heavenly intelligence. Things only move because they were intended to by God, and that he kind of put everything into motion. And then Averroes countered that, saying that any change is due to internal agents. And so then Albert the Great kind of combined those two. He was trying to reconcile all these disputes basically within the Arabic philosophers, because they couldn't really decide on anything in physics up until this point. And he said that motion is both action of agent and due to heavenly intelligences. And so he kind of puts 2 different ideas of motion, 2 different ideas of change here, generation and creation. So generation is substantial change, things that we can do here on Earth. We can just move things. But all that's necessary through creation is necessary for all that to happen, and creation is bringing into being out of nothing. So it kind of reconciles these 2 things, that like, yes, the world was created with a heavenly intelligence, but now that we are in the world, we can actually move things, and it doesn't need a heavenly intelligence to do everything. You're nodding your head.
Yes.
Do you have any comments on that? Yes.
There's a good summary.
You should get like one of those like buttons that you can get to like play a noise and just.
I think I'm just gonna have a horn, just like
harpo marks. Yeah.
Yes.
2 deviled eggs. Yes. And
Is it deviled eggs or hard-boiled eggs?
Hard-boiled. Is it?
I think it's hard-boiled eggs.
Is it hard-boiled eggs?
Yeah, because
now that you're saying hard-boiled eggs, yeah, sounds better.
2 hard-boiled eggs. Yeah, I think it's hard-boiled eggs.
Yes. Okay. That's a great scene. All of our listeners out there, the Young Ones and the Marx Brothers.
Marx Brothers, Night at the Opera, I think, wasn't it? And they came across on the ship.
Yes.
To be opera performers. You have to get it in a format where you can fast forward or skip the singing scenes with Zeppo. Those are awful. And Harpo's harp solos are great, but you have to be in the mood to watch like an 8-minute long harp solo.
Yes. Horse feathers is another great one.
That's
when
really good. We went to
Groucho's
college.
Groucho's the head of the university, and it ends with them in a chariot pulling footballs out of the back of it and scoring touchdown after touchdown.
Yes, it's not necessarily a chariot. It was a street sweeper.
That's right.
Car,
but
it's like a chariot.
Very much like a chariot,
Yes, for that purpose.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then Aquinas, Aquinas, he had ideas on physics. And he took arguments from both sides of this kind of idea of the world beginning. So he kind of believed that we really couldn't tell if the world had a beginning or an end, and he came up with different arguments for it. So one of these arguments, I kind of like both of these arguments, so I'm going to read.
Well, he presented 10 arguments on one side, 8 arguments on the other side, and then finally said, I don't know, just got to take it on faith.
Yeah. So it's like, you did all this work, dude. Like, make a decision.
It's kind of like the skeptics, isn't it? We could not know.
Yeah. So it's a very agnostic approach. So one of the points that he says is that he tries to show that the world must have existed forever in a reductio ad absurdum. So he says whatever begins to be was, before it existed, possible to be. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for it to come into being. So if the world began to be before it began, it was possible for it to be. And what is the possibility of being is matter, which is in potentiality both to being through form and to non-being through deprivation of form. So then, if the world began to be, there was matter before the world began. But matter cannot exist without form, but the matter of the world plus form is the world. So the world already was before it began to be, which is impossible. That was also written by Dr. Seuss.
Dr. Seuss does philosophy.
Yeah, so basically what he was saying, he kind of adapts these ideas of potentiality and actuality from Aristotle. And for something to exist in actuality, it has to be potentially for it to exist. But if the universe is everything, there's no way for any sort of potentiality to exist before actuality. So he says, well, because the universe is everything, it has to have existed forever.
Right.
But then he also kind of says, on the other side, if the world has always existed, then an infinite number of days has preceded today, but it is not possible to traverse anything infinite. Therefore, today could never have been reached, which is obviously false. So that's kind of the same argument that I put forward earlier, that you can't really move forward through infinity to get to today.
Right. And so he just said, I just got to believe God created things at a time.
Just do whatever.
Pray on
it. Yes. And then he also kind of says that we can't really deduce anything about the world's beginning, because he says we have to reason about the world through universals, but universals are abstract from time and place, and so therefore they cannot tell us about beginnings and endings.
And I like this. Maybe I shouldn't, but I like it. He says, reasoning about God will not help either. Reason may teach us necessary truths about him, but not the inscrutable degrees of his sovereign freedom. It's kind of interesting that you can't, the God is unknowable.
Yeah.
And so you can know some truths about him.
Yeah, that same sort of idea that we can't really put any of our own labels on God because, our words are like insufficient in any way because they were kind of created by us. And so it's like, well, how do we describe God?
I'm waiting for someone, and I'm sure I read it somewhere along the line. I'm trying to figure out a good reason why God is good. We'll have to get to that at some point.
You've brought that up several times. Yeah. I can't prove it because I don't know enough about these things, but
somebody's got to make a good argument for it.
Yes. And then Aquinas also says that the 4 elements are insufficient for a complex world, which is fantastic. Get away from the 4 elements.
Right.
And then he also says, kind of talking about astrology again, like we were saying, that the heavenly bodies do affect humans in some way, but they do not take away from free will. So he kind of says, like, well, it's possible for them to affect humans because, if the sun isn't shining, and it's raining, that affects our bodies. But he also kind of, I feel like there's some sort of...
I think it does affect your mood.
Oh, yeah.
I think the moon, the phases of the moon does affect us somehow.
Yeah.
I do.
There is actually kind of some evidence behind that, because on full moons, apparently hospital emergency rooms are like vastly more busy.
Yeah, police officers and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Just because there's just a little bit more crazy out there, a little more active.
Yeah.
Which makes sense that if... as we evolved, that we would be more active on moonlit nights because you'd be able to see prey or whatever, or you'd be a little bit safer. So there's a certain amount of logic to it.
Yeah, but he also does, I feel like there's some sort of spiritual argument there, but he also says, well, it can't really impact our free will.
Right. Because I don't want it to.
Yes. Yeah. And so this last section here, this reading was very short. It's about actual and potential infinity.
This did not really interest me that much.
It's interesting to me.
Really?
I like these ideas about infinity. It's fun to think about.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm going to read this big, long section from Bonaventure.
Oh, jeez.
I know how much you like when I read big sections of the book.
Go ahead. Do it slowly so people can follow along.
Yes. I was kind of making a point about reading fast with the Aquinas thing because I thought it was really funny.
Oh, yes. Yeah, no.
Thing, yes. And so Bonaventure says that it is impossible for any addition to be made to what is infinite. This is clear because whatever is added to becomes greater, but nothing is greater than the infinite. But if the world had no beginning, it has lasted for infinity. Therefore, no addition can be made to its duration. But it is clear that this is false. Every day a new solar revolution is added to all the past revolutions. Perhaps you will say that it is infinite with respect to the past, but actually finite with respect to the present that now obtains, and it is only with respect to the current finite part that one can find something greater. But we can show that with respect to the past, a greater can be found. It is an unquestionable truth that if the world is eternal, there have been infinite revolutions of the sun, and moreover that there have been 12 revolutions of the moon for every one of the sun. Hence, the moon has gone round more often than the sun. But the sun has gone round an infinite number of times, therefore it is impossible to find something exceeding what is infinite in the very respect in which it is infinite. But this is impossible. So it's a similar argument again, but then he's using it in terms of phases of the moon. For as many times as the sun sets, there are 12 phases of the moon, and we cannot multiply 12 by that infinity that is the sun rising and sun sets, and so we can't really say that the world had no beginning.
I'm not an expert mathematician, but I do recall doing some calculus equations that had infinity plus 1 or infinity squared.
Yes.
Did I miss something there? Because I think you can add to infinity mathematically.
Yes, I don't know much about calculus. I've only taken.
I mean, a lot of it is to eliminate the variable of infinity.
Yes.
By having on both sides of the equation.
Yes.
But it kind of makes sense to me that you could add to infinity.
But I think with the thing with infinity and calculus is that it's, as far as I understand, which is very basic calculus, is it's finding the area basically under a curve.
Yeah.
And so you divide that basically into infinity. Because, if you have a curve and you can make 4 rectangles.
Parabola, where it
parabola,
always is getting closer and closer to the axis without ever touching it. Is that right?
Parabolas, yes. They do eventually kind of go up.
But they'd never touch the axis.
Well, it's not necessarily the axis, but yes, parabolas
what would it be? It would be the line, right?
Well, yeah, any line, but that's not an axis.
But it goes on to infinity, but never reaches it.
But the thing with this thing that I was saying is you could split basically a parabola into, if you look at this area underneath the parabola, you could split it into, 4 rectangles, and you can find the area of those rectangles. And that gives you a decent approximation of the area. If you split it into 8 rectangles, that gives you a better approximation because there's less error outside. And eventually the principle of calculus is if you split it into infinity, you'll get the exact area.
Huh.
Yes.
All right.
Anyway, that wasn't related to really anything here.
No, it's related. It's the foundational for theories of infinity.
Yes.
But go ahead. What's the next?
Henry of Harclay. You look confused.
No.
Did you not read about Henry of Harclay?
I was just thinking, if I were to be Mark blank, what would it be? Like Gozer the Destroyer.
Yes.
From Ghostbusters,
yes.
Right? Isn't that what it was?
I think so. Gozer, yeah.
Gozer the Destructor?
Yes, I think so.
Or is that Ghostbusters 2? There's a guy from the painting. That was Ghostbusters 2. And then the Ghostbusters 1 had the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
I think number 2 was Gozer the Destroyer. I could be wrong.
I don't know.
So what would you be? Adam the...
Well, you never said what you would be.
Well, I don't know. That's why I'm saying I don't know.
I don't know either. I've never thought about it. I've never thought about giving myself a title.
Well, I guess people give you the title.
Yes, I have to destroy something for people to call me the Destroyer.
Correct. Yeah. So you'd be something different than that.
Yes. And so Henry of Harclay, he gave this. I don't think even Kenny really kind of understood it here. He says that points can hold a hole and still differ in position. So he's kind of going into
a point doesn't have space.
Yes. And so he's kind of going into, the idea of a point is basically an infinitely small concept of...
it's not even small.
Yes, it's just...
It has no mass.
Yes. Because it's basically where a line begins and ends.
Correct.
That's 2 points make a line. And so...
It's a distance between 2 points makes a line.
Yes.
The 2 points don't. The 2 points are 2 points.
Yes. But then he kind of says that the 2 points can basically be in the exact same... I don't know how...
Exact same spot, but
yes,
that's 1 point.
Yes. But he says that they can differ in position.
That is wrong.
That is wrong?
I mean, that may be what he says, but that's wrong. But if the 2 points are in a different position, then it's a line.
He says they can touch, hold a hole, and still different in position. And I don't understand it.
He's wrong.
Okay.
Yeah. He is now, what's his name?
Henry of Harclay.
He is now Henry the Dumb.
Henry the Dumb. All right, well, I'll have to remember that every time he comes up.
Yeah, he's not coming up again.
He's coming up again.
You think he's going to come up again? No. What about Occam? He's
Occam,
next, isn't he?
yes, he says something about points too. He says that a point is not an absolute thing distinct from substance and quality in the other quantities listed by modern writers, because if it was, it'd be something other than a line. But this is false. Is it part of a line or not? Not a part, because, as Aristotle tries to show, a line is not made up out of points. If it is not part of a line, and a line is manifestly not part of a point, then there are two wholly distinct things, neither a part of the other. So he says that a point doesn't really exist. We cannot define what a point is, because if we try to say that it's, the two ends of a line, for that to happen, we could also reasonably say that we could line up points to make a line, but that's not true because points are, nothing, basically.
Right.
They have no matter, they have no space. And he says that, but for them to exist, they would have to take up space, and that kind of defeats the entire point of a point.
No, because the point of a point,
yes, the point of a point.
Is that it doesn't take up the space.
Yes, that's what I was saying.
That's the point.
Yes, he says for them to exist, they would have to take up space.
But they don't really
which goes
exist.
against the point of a point.
Yes, it's a line. It's not
yes.
a point.
Yes.
It's a line between 2 points.
Yes.
Right.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Oh, okay.
So that's really all he says about points.
We're going to go on to Burley.
I was going to talk about Richard Kilvington.
Why?
Because I like Richard Kilvington.
You do not.
What
did Richard Kilvington add to
I like
discussion?
this little sophisma that he has here.
A what?
Sophismata.
What's your mouth?
It's a sophism. But
Yes,
small,
go ahead.
Small sophism. He says that when Socrates... What?
Little tiny.
What are you doing?
It was a little tiny sophistry. No. Go ahead.
So he says that when Socrates traverses a distance A, should we say that he traverses it at any time he is in the process of traversing, or only when he has completed the process? There seems a problem either way. If we take the second option, then Socrates is only traversing A when he has ceased to do so. If we take the first option, then Socrates traverses A infinitely many times, since the motion is infinitely divisible, yet he only traverses it once. This is basically saying, if you're midway between, your home and your destination, have you actually traversed anywhere? Because, you haven't made it to your destination, you haven't completed that full path, but then you say, if you have traversed anything, you can really say that you've traversed nothing, because then you can split that into halves, and you can split that into halves all the way to infinity.
I think going through this book and these philosophers, especially in the infinity thing, almost makes me wish that when you go off to college, you will have a stoner for a roommate, so that you give that guy endless sleepless nights as he contemplates these concepts. He'll come home all stoned, back to the dorm room, and be like, "Hey, I was thinking, when you're going, when like if Socrates is going from point A to point B, and you divide it equally, and he doesn't even go anywhere. Oh man, that's pretty cool."
Is this what all this is going to mount up to?
Yeah, that's the usefulness.
That's the usefulness of the podcast.
Yeah,
of philosophy, yeah.
Yeah, philosophy is to
mess with stoners.
Mess with stoners.
Yes.
Or to be a stoners. Don't do that.
And so the Kilvington kind of solves this issue basically by reframing the language, because you can say that, well, he will traverse this point,
right.
And then you can kind of say that that's true. And he says he has started traversing this distance, and so that's how you kind of solve that riddle.
Just semantics. Yeah. Just the wordplay.
Well, I thought it was neat because I read that section. I'm like, how do you solve that? And he's like, well, you can just change the words. And I'm like, oh, well, that's
pretty much all philosophy. All you gotta do is say it a different way.
Yes.
Yeah, problem solved.
So then Burley,
I have now solved the problem.
I solved the problem. I changed the whole problem, and now it's solved.
All you have to do is change the equation. Yes. Just change the question. I'll give you an answer.
Be a great press secretary.
That's a whole different thing.
So then Walter Burley, I
like this.
Yes, this was interesting. So he's kind of the first to say that hot and cold are the same thing, just degrees on a scale.
Right.
Because in the past, you had these people kind of linking them each to their respective element, and that's how we get hot and cold, and they're entirely separate. But he says, well, they're just degrees. If I am cold, I'm just less hot. If I'm hot, I'm just less cold. They're on the same scale. And he also says that this is basically the foundation of modern temperatures, that we don't look at hot and cold as separate things. There's just units of heat, and that is how we tell temperature.
I asked a question of my high school chemistry teacher once, and she just said she didn't have an answer, and she just said, we'll talk about that later. We never did. And I never did get an answer. I'm sure there is a scientist out there that can answer this. It's probably a very simple question.
Many scientists that listen to our podcast.
I didn't say that anybody would be able to answer, because they will not know the question. If you ask a question, nobody listens to it. Anyway, we were doing a chemistry experiment, and we were talking about giving off of heat from the chemical process, or whatever it was. And I said, how do you know it's not, it's not giving off heat? How do you know it's not gaining cold? And there was no answer to that. Why are we measuring heat? Why aren't we measuring cold?
I think it goes back to the law of thermodynamics.
Right.
And that everything has to equal zero. Basically, at the end of all time, basically, all energy will be zero.
Then why aren't we measuring the opposite?
Because then I think you just have to deal with a bunch of negatives.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
It'd be easier just to measure heat rather than cold, because then you'd have to deal with negatives.
Or maybe those are the positives and the heat is negative.
Oh.
Turn it upside down, man.
Oh, man.
I messed with a few stoners in my day.
Did you?
I did have this one long-running debate with a guy, a great guy. I won't mention his name in case anybody would. Anyway, he was his family was like more fundamentalist Christians, and I was a philosophy student, and he couldn't get around this argument. It really bothered him, and this is completely off topic, but similar. And I said, well, because he said that God could not. Same thing about whether God is good or not.
Mm-hmm.
I've been thinking about this a long time without actually getting anything headway. But I said, well, wait a second. God is good because he created everything, right? Yes. And he loves all of God's creations, right? Yes. And it includes all men, no matter how good or bad they are, yes. And it includes animals, right? Mm-hmm. And yes, because he created the animals and the beasts and birds and all that stuff. And I said, but and the Old Testament says, the Jews left Egypt and got across the sea, the Red Sea.
Yeah.
And yes, and then the Pharaoh's soldiers followed and their chariots and all that stuff, and then God let the sea drown all the soldiers, and he had a good argument about how the soldiers were not doing the will of God and they deserved this and that, and he felt very good about refuting the expected theory. I said, yeah, but man, what about the horses? Why didn't he spare the horses? He killed like hundreds of horses. I mean, it wasn't just like he let them die. He put that sea on top of them and they drowned. That's a horrible death for anything, especially a horse. Have you ever seen a horse drown? Mm-mm. Me neither. I don't ever want to see a horse drown. And we went around on that because we commuted from St. Charles to Umsel. Uh-huh. Every day. It's about at least a half-hour drive from where I lived at the time. And we were around on that. And we just had to come to, we agreed to disagree whether the God was evil because he murdered a bunch of horses.
Well,
I wasn't saying he was evil, mind you, but that's, kind of like these messing with, asking these odd questions to try to figure out what the...
I mean, I guess I would say that I think the best proof for God being good is that there are good things in the world. If we had an evil God, he wouldn't allow for any good things to happen.
Well, no, because if it's all bad, then it's just level. You have to have the good to make the bad meaningful. It's kind of like you don't appreciate a warm spring day unless you've suffered through a winter.
But that same argument could be made for the opposite, in that we can't appreciate the good without there being bad.
Correct. That's right. I'm just saying I have not heard a good argument, a convincing argument that God has to be good. I'm not saying God's not good, but to say that he has, the creator, mm-hmm. because he created us, is good. Why? Mm-hmm. Why isn't he putting us here so that we suffer?
I mean, I like existing.
Toy with us, you know, like you know,
It's like Supernatural.
Yeah, very similar to that. Yeah, and there's really, I mean, I don't know that there's a definitive argument that I have heard of that says God has to be good. I'm not saying God's not good, but logically.
That's another show our listeners should watch, Supernatural. Great show. Ending sucks.
Yeah, I think the last couple seasons it went downhill.
Yeah, it went
downhill. And what's his name that played Sam Winchester? His acting got worse over time, which is unusual for an actor. Usually actors get better when they age. He got a lot worse because he just had the same expression where he kind of snort. You know, like that was it was exasperated or sad or angry. That's all he'd do. He's like a little hush snort. Now Dean was good. I think my favorite season was when Dean was palling around with Crowley the demon. That was a pretty good.
Great character.
Yeah, that was a good character too.
All right, I guess we should end the episode here. So this has been episode 15 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
And you can follow us on Twitter at ULMTD, O Opinions, and win a free shirt if anybody decides to tweet at us. I feel like we're basically just giving away a shirt for nothing now.
Except for that no one will ever win.
No one will ever
No
win.
one will ever tweet at us. I'd like to know how
the longest running giveaway in the history of giveaways.
And the longest running account with no tweets.
Well, actually...
Like an active social network account that has
nobody tweeting at them.
Yeah. No response, no comments, no nothing.
That's kind of funny because my friends, I told you, some of them know about this, and they were asking if they tweeted at me if they would get a free shirt.
Well, of course they would.
They would?
Yeah. Okay. Don't tell them that. Make them listen to the episode, and then they'll get to the end of this.
Yeah. So if any of you out there are listening at the end of this over 40-minute episode, if any of you tweet at me, you'll get a free shirt.
Not everyone.
Not everyone.
But
the person who has the best tweet at us.
And so right now, no one is tweeting. So
yes.
If just one person in the next week tweets, they will be the automatic default winner.
Yes.
Because that tweet, no matter how stupid, will be the most interesting tweet of that week.
Yes, by default.
Right.
Something to look forward to.
Yes.